So I'm trying to clean the dop wax residue off of these. Just using acetone or fingernails polish remover. Now there's modern fingernail polish remover that is non-acetone, and that won't work. So you definitely want to make sure it has acetone, or you can buy acetone. I think at the hardware store. I've got this stuff at the dollar store. I cleaned off most of the other ones. I didn't realize I had missed a couple here. Okay. So these are all supposed to be 12 by 20. So let's see how we did. 12.25, 12.16, 12.31, 12.18, 12.20. 19.61, 1984, 1971, 1976, 1924. So they're all within like just a few decimal points of 12 by 20, and to be honest, no judge is going to be able to tell from outside of the case. So I'm going to declare these all perfectly fine. Let's take a look at our 38 millimeters. I'm not worried about fingerprints at this point in time. .03, 37.92, 37.52, 37.56. So again, they're all still within an acceptable range. Now let's take a look at these pieces of wood. These are supposed to be 25 by 35. 25.39, 25.24, oops, 25.51, 24.99, 35.09, 35.04, 35.23, 35.44. $25.37, 25.27, 25.09, 35.36, 34.74, and 35.18. Again, all with within just a few decimal points. Here's these should be 52 by 38. We'll start with the 38 first. 38.17, 37.74, 38.32, 38.85. That one's a little bigger than the rest. 30, yeah. And 52.99. So that one's a little bit long, but again, no judge is going to be able to tell. 51.92. 51.95. 51.67. So those are all still very close. Now the only dimension I'm going to worry about on these is it has to be less than 100 millimeters. And this guy is, oops, come on, 95.92, so just slightly under 96. So and this is the biggest of all of them. So the rest of them are all going to be within 100 millimeters. So from a size perspective, these are all just fine. Okay, so now let's see what we're going to eliminate. So this cathedral, it's kind of there, but it's got a little spot on the side which I don't care for, and only that, but the plume, if you will, doesn't show very well, so it's not very showy. So with all these other choices, I'm gonna set this one aside. I mean, it would still, make a nice ring or pendant or something like that, but not for competition. This piece of Laguna, I don't know if you can see it or not, but there's some little pits in the very top of it, in the middle of the fortification. I'm going to see if I can clean that up, because it didn't look like that when I was cutting it. But if I can't, then again, I don't want those pits to show up. So that's a maybe. This pigeon blood looks just fine. You can see the, there's some dop wax right there, so I didn't get it completely clean. But it looks good. So this one's acceptable. This is the Botswana with parallax. The parallax is kind of sort of there, not as nice as I'd hoped, but it's still a nice looking cab. Took a wonderful polish, so this one's definitely acceptable. And then this other Botswana, which is considerably thinner than the other Botswana. Again, thickness does not matter, but it looks good as well. So I have 3 and maybe a 4th one that are perfectly acceptable. And then as far as the obsidians, you obviously want to figure out what's the proper orientation. In this case, this is, so you can see the chatoyance in there. And I don't see anything. There's little pieces of lint on there, but those will get cleaned up later. And again, ignore fingerprints. Now there's like little bubbles and stuff, but those are under the surface, so that's not a problem. And so that one's acceptable. The snowflake, same thing, other than some lint or stuff on there, but I'll clean that off later. And then the rainbow obsidian. And I specifically wanted this piece because of that mottled chatoyant look in there. And it's perfectly acceptable as well. So all of the obsidian is good. My little petrified wood knot, or whatever you want to call it, this is a fracture running through it, but hopefully you can see it is healed and it's not on the surface. So this one is still okay to use. Here's a piece of Arizona wood. Couple of spots on there, but I think those are just leftovers, and again, we're ignoring fingerprints at this point. I don't like this fracture line. Looks like I have a couple little scratch marks on the side. Again, that can be cleaned up. Now I suppose I could put it sideways and mount it this way, and you know, most of that little fracture line, which is healed, not a problem, you wouldn't see it. So this is still okay. Here's another piece, same thing. It's got a healed fracture running through it, but it's good and clean, not a problem. And I back beveled these, so there shouldn't be any big chips or anything coming out of it. Although I think one of these, maybe this one, yeah, so there's a chip on the back, but if I mounted it this way, no judge is going to be able to see it. And this has a good clean surface, again, ignoring fingerprints. So this one's acceptable. The palm wood looks really nice, except that this spot right here is a pit. And if I were judging it, I would call that out every time. Plus there's pits along the sides. So unfortunately, there's more there. This one does not make the cut. This piece of petrolite wood, same thing. There's a crack down here. There's a crack up here on the edge. It's too many. You know, I mean, these seem to be perfectly fine for a piece of jewelry or something like that, but not for competition. So that guy gets eliminated. And this one's the same thing. With this, you can actually feel this if you rub your fingernail across it. So this is definitely a crack, and it's hitting the surface. So this piece of Arizona wood is also eliminated. So, you know, this is why I cut so many of these things, because you just never know when a pit or something is going to show up. So now these are the 52 by 38 Jaspers. This polychrome Jasper is actually kind of disappointing. It didn't give very good polish, but also this pit showed up, and it didn't matter how thin I cut it, it still continued to show up. So I finally just decided, well, I'll polish it up. And it's okay. It's a little more satiny than shiny. So this one definitely is eliminated. This big Jasper is full of pits. There's a huge one right there. Hopefully you can see that in the camera. Well, do you know what happens when you don't have the camera pointing at your subject matter? You have a bunch of wasted time with your videos. So, this is round 2, and I'm sure you don't want to see a big, huge outtake. And I think at the tail end of the last good take, I talked about the elimination of the 12 by 20. This guy has pit right here, and the plume just isn't that great. I mean, it's an okay cab, but it's just not, you know, spectacular, I guess. So that got eliminated. These pieces of wood got eliminated. What you didn't see though is why these Jaspers got eliminated. The Biggs here has a huge pit right here, and there's multiple soft spots on it. There's a few more pits in the middle. Hopefully you can see that in the camera. So this one may be perfectly suitable for jewelry, belt buckle, that sort of thing. Certainly not for competition. The polychrome Jasper, not a very good polish. I'm very disappointed with the polish, but you can see right here, there's a big, huge pit. There's a couple more over here that just would not go away, and I cut it pretty thin, so I just decided it was time to be done with it. Plus, it only got like a satin polish. Now, I might try an experiment with it later, but for now, it's been eliminated. This bloodstone, which has got great color and everything, but see these little white stripes here? You know, this is pits, and they filled with polish as I was polishing it. So, and then I noticed there's a few marks on the surface here, so I'm going to take that back to the wheel and clean those up, because just like the Biggs, it's fine for, you know, a bow tie or a piece of jewelry or something, but not for competition. And then the heart, it looks really good. This almost looks like a fracture, but it's not. It's internal. There's nothing wrong with that. However, The banding in here, fortification, which is very common, has a bunch of little tiny pits right along the bands, and that's very common with fortification agate. So again, same thing. This, you know, this would be fine as a piece of jewelry, but not competition. And I still need to polish the cleavage here, but that'll have to be done by hand with a stick or something like that. Maybe I'll show another separate video of doing that. But that's why these were eliminated. I need to make sure I get enough on here to hold the T-pin solidly, because I have to push it into styrofoam. So this is my orientation. I don't want to change that. All right, let's set these guys aside. Now, if you'll notice, I'm using larger pins for the bigger pieces, because I don't want them coming loose. And they have a lot more weight to hold up. Now, these don't have to be perfect, because I can shuffle them around a little bit. Once I push them down into the styrofoam. Now this one, I want it to come right out of that little point there. So that's the only one that I'm super worried about. Okay, so I got some of this pink insulation, which is exactly 1 inch thick. And I'm squaring off the corners using this T-square. And then I'm going to use this blade to cut 2 6x6 squares, because that's what the dimensions require. And then I'll glue them together to get the 2 inch thick dimension. Alright, now I've got my two 6x6" squares, and I glue them together, and I will have my riser. Okay, it took a little more than I expected, but I got some glue here. I'm going to glue these two pieces together. This does not have to be a massive joint like in wood or anything like that. It just has to be enough to hold them together. And then I'll just put a weight on top of that to hold it, and we're good. So every once in a while I go by the fabric store and I look for remnants, and I pick just small pieces of material that I can use for risers or whatever. And so in order to cover a 6x6" by 2" square, the minimum size has to be at least 12 by 12 because it has to wrap all the way around the back. So here's an example. This little remnant is 26 by 45, and it only cost me $2.16. So I just pick up various colors, things like that. I've used this for something else, so I don't believe that they are big enough for what we need to do. Well, maybe. Just barely. But I've used that for something else. I don't really want to use that color. I think I'll use this color and cut out a 12 by 12 square, and then show how that all fits together. Obviously, I'm not a seamstress, but you get the gist. And I'm cutting this larger than I need, exactly for that reason. Alright, now before I attach this to my riser block and all that, I'll iron it. And actually I think this is the better side. This will be the outside. Now here's a little segment of how I attach the T-pins. This is a T-pin. It's for upholstery. And I just got some clear silicone and glued the T-pins to the back of it with the orientation of how I want the stone. And then, like on the little 12 by 20s, I actually had to clip the top of it off because the T is wider than the 12-20, and you would see it, and if the judge can see the pin, that's a deduction. So these are the stones that are moving forward. This is Berber agate, this is bloodstone. The three obsidians are all just fine. The polka dot agate, the Brazilian agate, and these three pieces of petrified wood. Come on. So those are my final pieces to choose from. And so this is an example of the riser. It's just styrofoam, the insulation. You can get it at Home Depot. And the pin, you want to just insert it into the foam to the point where you do not see the bottom of the pin, because if a judge can see the bottom of the pin, they will give you a deduction. Apparently, that pin's taken up too far, so I'll have to deal with that. This will be the same way. Now, I don't know if you noticed, but I put these all at a slight angle because when you're putting them on display, the lights are going to be above, just like in this case, and you want the light refraction to show the face of the cabochon. And so, like for these two obsidians, you want it to actually show the whole effect that the reason they were cut, right? For the green sheen obsidian or the gold sheen obsidian. Boy, my brain stopped functioning today for some reason. So you want to set them at a slight angle, and when I go through the riser block, I'll go into that in more detail. Okay, here's a better look at all of the cabs. This is not how they will be finished display. Obviously, they'll need to go onto the 6x6x2 riser block, and but you can see how you can't see the bottom of the pins. Hopefully, you can see the chatoyance in these two obsidians, and everything is viewable. Now, once I get to actually populating the riser block, then I'll have them spaced out and I'll go into more detail in that. But they are all standing up on their own, slightly angled back, and the thing is, you want them all to be at the same angle. Looks like this polka dot is not quite the same angle as the rest, so I would need to adjust that. And you want everything to face straight forward towards the front of the case, so that it can be viewed by the judges and by the public, I guess is the best thing to say. So now I need to get to work on choosing which of the 5 will be my final product, and then which or get them situated on the riser block, which I'm still is a work in progress. Okay, so here's our riser block, and I ironed the piece of fabric. So now let's see if we can wrap wrap the fabric around the riser block. Now we need to pull this tight and tighten up the end pieces. I'm not too much overlap because we can touch on this piece later. So I'm going to touch on this back. Let's see how this works out. So you've got much folding like that, so that's not going to work quite right. Come on. Okay, so I cleaned this up a little bit, and it's much nicer, although there's still a little bit of bulge there, but I don't think anybody's going to be that particular. So here's my square, and now I just need to figure out which of the cabochons I'm going to use, and then decide how I want to display them on the piece. And then I got to create labels for them, and then we should be ready to go. Almost there. Okay, so before I start punching holes into my covered riser, I took a spare piece of the foam and set it up as a template to see how these things would look with spacing and things like that. And so I think this is the configuration I'm going to go with. I also created some little tiny labels to go under the various pieces. And so on. So now that I've chosen the pieces I'm going to use as my presentation, the rest of these will just go in my competition boxes and maybe be used at a later date if I ever decide to compete. So that's what I'm thinking. And now I just got to put the labels under each stone, and then it'll be ready for display. So this will be my final presentation. Obviously, I'm not able to compete in this skill level. I cut at a much higher level than a beginner, so there's it would be foolish of me to even consider entering this in competition. I would be laughed at. Now here's a look at the display with lighting appropriate to set off the Mexican rainbow obsidian or green obsidian, and I've got all the tags lined up more or less. And everything is viewable. From this angle you can't quite see this tag, but in the case you would be standing up a little higher and you should be able to see the tag just fine. So this table is currently set to about 32.5 inches. Most times your display stands are set to somewhere around 34 to 36. So I'm going to adjust this up a little higher, and then we'll take a look at what the display will look like at a normal height. Okay, now we're up to 36 inches. So now I'll put this at the level of my head and get stuff out of the way. Maybe. This is what I would normally see within a case, and now you can see all the labels and all the pieces. Nothing is blocking, and that way, you know, a judge or just a visitor can see the display entirely. Everything is nice and neat. Everything is in straight lines. That's just the way I chose to do it. And hopefully it looks like a really nice display. So that's what I want to call them customers. I don't want to. That's what the normal public would see if they were looking at this display in a case at a show or something like that. And that's kind of what you're going for when you set up your display. Now, could I have set things up in more of a square fashion, something like that? Yeah, I could have, but I just decided this time that's what I wanted to do. So there's another thought on how you want to display this stuff. So there we go. This kind of concludes the series I've done showing how these were all created. And obviously there's other acceptable stones. I could have chosen different ones, but you know, these are what I consider to be the best of the lot that I did. And obviously I would want to clean these off with acetone before putting them on display so that I can get all my fingerprints off of them, because I've got plenty of them on there. But there you go. This is what would be considered a mini cab competition. And here's the rules again real quick. You can see those in the first video. And I will put links to the various files so that if you're really interested in doing this, you can download your own version of the files and proceed. And if you decide that this is something you want to try, then feel free to contact me. My email is in my About tab on my YouTube channel, and I would be more than happy to answer any questions about competition at all levels. And I wait to hear from you. Thank you very much.